Today we're going to be studying in Daniel chapter 6. In Daniel chapter 5, we saw the end of the Babylonian captivity when Darius the Mede took over the kingdom overnight from Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. Now we're going to pick up in the story where Darius is the king and he's appointing who's going to be the leadership over his kingdom now that he's taken over that area. Chapter 6, verse 1. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them, so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Now he planned to do this. He hadn't done it yet. Verse 4. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. So why are they trying to trip him up? Because they don't want him to get that position. They want the highest position, one of those other ones, one of the other rulers. Verse 5. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So they were looking for some flaw in Daniel, and they couldn't find anything. So they came up with a bright idea. Okay, we know he's very dedicated to his God, so it's got to be something to do with his law, that we got to forbid him to do something that we know that he won't follow because it's against his law. So they put their heads together, and this is a plan they come up with. It's a plot of deception. Verse 6. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all, now that's a lie, agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue a decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. This is very deceptive. Here they're coming and telling the king that even Daniel had agreed to this. They're saying they all had agreed to this, and that's not true. They knew that if they could get him to sign this decree, that according to the Medo-Persian law, once you issue a decree, even if you made a mistake, you can't rescind it. You can't change it. So they're going to convince him to write this under deception, and once he realizes what's the truth, he can't change it, no matter what he figures out, even if it was done under deception. Verse 10. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. So what does Daniel do when he finds out about this decree? That anybody that prays to anybody or any other god other than King Darius is going to be put into the lion's den? He doesn't get scared. He does what he always does. He goes to his upstairs room, opens a window. He doesn't even try to do this in secret. He keeps his windows open and he looks towards Jerusalem because that was part of the law, that if they had gone into captivity, if they ever wanted to pray, they would face toward the temple there in Jerusalem, and God would hear their prayers even if they're in captivity. Daniel's not ashamed to follow what his law had told him to do. He's not going to try to hide it. He openly prays on his knees, and he does this 3 times a day, so it's not anything new. That's why they picked this particular thing to let the king sign this decree, because they knew that Daniel would never abide by it. So what is he doing on his knees? He's thanking God, but he's also praying for help because he knows that he's going to need God's help now because he's going to get thrown into the lion's den. They go on to say, "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. He loved Daniel. He did not want to see Daniel hurt, but he knew that he had made this decree, and no matter what he tries to do to rescue him, he's shut down. We can see what they say in verse 15. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." They're reminding him, you can't rescue him. You can't change this law. You've got to do what you wrote down. Verse 16. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you." So now Darius was going to have to rely on Daniel's God to save him. And if Daniel's time on this earth is not finished, if his job isn't done, God's going to rescue him. He could have chosen to let Daniel die that day through that means, but God still has more work for Daniel to do. He's got more visions coming that he's got to share with us. Verse 17. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Once that seal was put on, you couldn't change it. Verse 18. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. That's how much he loved Daniel. He was so upset. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. He didn't want any entertainment. He was just counting down the minutes before he could go in the morning and see if Daniel had survived the lion's den. Verse 19. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" He's hoping he's going to hear a reply. He is so distressed, he's not sure he's going to hear from Daniel ever again. Verse 21. Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children. Many times we see this in the Bible. When a person in a leadership position has sinned, they are sometimes punished by not only their life, but the lives of the people in their own family. So that's what we see here. All those men that told the lie, that said that Daniel had agreed and had been falsely saying things about Daniel, they're the ones that get thrown into lion den, but not just them, even their wives and their children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. What a horrible way to die. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, "May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end." This is the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had figured out. Well, now this other King Darius from the Medo-Persian kingdom is figuring this out too, that God is the true God. His kingdom can't be destroyed. He's got dominion over all the earth. Okay, verse 27. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That's the co-reign again going on. So God said that he was going to prosper Daniel during this time because he was faithful. He wasn't going to be killed by these wicked men. He had protected him.